The SEAL unit huddled low inside a narrow pass, hemmed in with hostiles advancing from 3 directions. No way out. The radio spat static, useless. All Allied positions had gone dark. Then a lone gunshot cracked from a ridge they thought was deserted. One enemy dropped, then another, then 3 more. Chaos hit the enemy formation as pinpoint shots landed. Is someone up there? One SEAL whispered into the tension. Commander Aaron, eyes glued to the scope, replied in a near whisper. She's here. Lara Veysel was 30, European. Her dark hair pulled back into a tight knot. Petite, quiet, sharp-eyed. She'd been stationed at Echo Point 17, a freezing high-altitude outpost near the border, brought in to assist with forensic tech work after a strange disappearance. To the special ops teams there, Lara was just a quiet tech girl. She wore weatherproof jackets, took silent notes in corners, never seen with a weapon in hand. The SEALs nicknamed her Ghost Tech. She had a way of showing up exactly when things went sideways, then vanishing just as quietly. One night, after the squad came back from a failed op, Lara slipped into the armory unnoticed. The guard on shift quipped, "Don't grab that M110. Analysts don't need it." She gave a small smile, walked right past him, and reached for a different rifle. No one saw it. She'd already logged temporary clearance for long-range support arms. Inside the command center, her orders were clear. Help with terrain mapping, stay out of combat. But to her, those topographic scans weren't just maps. They were personal archives. The base had a rhythm only she seemed to notice. Each morning, she sat in the far corner of the briefing room, studying route maps others viewed as lines and grids. To her, they breathed. During lunch, she'd vanish for 23 minutes on the deck, just long enough to circle perimeter, feel the wind, track sightlines no textbook ever mentioned. While others played cards or checked into a home over video, Lara would stand quietly near the comms array, tuning into static, not for intel, but for the gaps between sounds, the frequencies that told her what the mountains were hiding. Sergeant Khan once asked her why she never came to poker night. "I'm mapping," she replied. He figured she meant the digital kind, but she was memorizing shadows, angles, places someone might need saving if the radios ever went silent. There was an M2010 sniper rifle in the armory marked unreliable. Scope drift, they said, too sensitive to cold. Lara had walked past that rifle 14 times, noticing flaws the armorers had missed. The issue wasn't the rifle. It was a mount built for flat ground, not steep, high-angle mountain shooting. 3 days before everything changed, Lara quietly recalibrated it. She tuned it for ridge, 13th wind, and angles. She mapped out firing paths that, on paper, shouldn't even be possible. When people asked about her background, Lara always said she worked in data and systems. That was true, just not the full truth, like describing the ocean as just wet. The team had begun to notice little details. How she'd frown at weather briefings even before the satellites flagged trouble, how she'd recommend route changes that seemed arbitrary, yet always avoided the zones where patrols had vanished. Her gear bag weighed too much for someone supposedly carrying only computers. Specialist Arda once joked, either Ghost Tech's got spooky instincts or she's been here before. He was closer to the mark than he realized. The morning of the mission, Lara watched him gear up with an unreadable expression. She'd already analyzed their path 17 times. She knew exactly where it would fail, but her orders were firm. Observe, support, nothing more. As the team moved out, Commander Aaron passed Lara the comms headset. Track their movement. Log anything unusual. She gave a silent nod, clipped the headset in place, and opened her laptop. On the screen, 6 dots crept across a live map, entering a canyon she knew better than her own reflection. 3 years earlier, she had crawled out of that same canyon alone, carrying truths that would never touch a single report. A sniper once told me, "The best of us don't show up in the records. We sit at the edges of maps, always watching, always unseen." Lara fit that mold exactly. The moment I saw her studying that terrain model, I realized she wasn't just interpreting topography. She'd walked it before. The mission involved a 6-man SEAL unit moving into Morrow Gorge to locate an enemy comms relay. The objective sounded simple enough, but once they stepped into the jagged ravine, It became clear they'd walked into a trap. Exit paths cut off, comms dead. Clouds rolled in heavy and low, cutting off any chance of aerial support. One SEAL asked, "Any high ground with visibility?" Only Ridge 13, but that had been written off as inaccessible. Back in command, Lara followed it all through her 3D terrain sim. When she recognized the setup, she took off her headset, stepped over to the rack, and picked up the overlooked M2010. The rifle had been dismissed as unreliable. She didn't ask clearance, no paperwork, no explanation, just walked out into the snow. Ridge 13 lay 2.3 kilometers away. Nothing but steep, punishing ascent. Lara didn't check her route, didn't pause at forks, didn't slow for the incline. Her breath stayed steady despite the thin mountain air. She moved like someone revisiting old ground. She knew the rhythm of that mountain, the way the wind rotated every 40 minutes, how the granite walls produced vertical heat drafts that would throw off aim by nearly a meter, how snow density shifted the way sound carried. 14 minutes after leaving base, the SEALs were pinned in the gorge below. Machine gun bursts forced them flat while flanking units closed in. Then came a sharp crack from the ridge they'd marked as deserted. The gunner collapsed instantly, a clean headshot from 3,500 meters out. A shot experts said couldn't be done in that wind at that altitude. The attackers broke ranks, confused. They'd expected ground resistance, not in a fire from high ground their intel had flagged as unreachable. Second round, then a third, each one precise, targeting leadership and support positions, not blind cover fire. These were calculated takedowns, breaking apart their whole formation. The SEALs had no idea who was watching their backs. All they knew was that someone had taken that ridge and shot like myth. Back at base, radar verified the shots, fired from exactly 3,500 meters. "No ID," one officer murmured. "That's the same triple grouping as the Falcon line hit last year, but no one could remember who'd made those legendary shots." The radio came alive with uncertain voices. "Unidentified shooter. Confirm identity. Confirm your position." No sound came from Ridge 13. With their gunners and leaders down, the enemy squad unraveled, pulling back in confusion. They prepared for a 6-man Special Forces team. What they hadn't planned for was a sniper who could land shots with surgical accuracy from almost 2 miles away. Team lead Mert grabbed the radio. "Base, identify friendly sniper support immediately. Someone just saved our..." Before he could finish, command cut in, "No sniper units deployed in your sector. Repeat, 0 friendly marksmen assigned to your location." Then who the hell's firing the gorge? Everything had flipped. What started as a kill zone had become a clean extraction. The enemy radio outpost was abandoned, its guards retreating into the hills. But the real enigma waited up on Ridge 13. As the SEALs swept the canyon and prepped to move out, they kept glancing toward that ridge, hoping to glimpse the phantom who'd save their lives. Nothing. No movement, no glint of glass or flash of muzzle. "Whoever that was," Mert muttered, "knows exactly what they're doing." At precisely 1,347 hours, 3 perfect rounds had turned defeat into survival, fired from a location deemed unusable, too high, too far, too unstable in wind. And yet someone had been there. Someone who understood that terrain far better than any map implied. Someone who could read wind like a language and adjust in real time like a machine with the instincts of a ghost. Back at base, Lara returned to her desk exactly 18 minutes after she'd slipped away. Her field jacket carried dust and frost. Her boots left faint traces of alpine snow. Her laptop showed continuous comms monitoring. When asked about radio anomalies, she replied calmly, "Standard tactical noise. Nothing beyond protocol." But her eyes told another story. Sharp now, no longer buried in anonymity. They held the focus of someone who just reconnected with an old part of herself. The M2010 sat back in its place, spotless, restored. The once faulty scope now aligned with precision. The logbook noted 3 fewer rounds and issued. Commander Aaron reviewed the mission log twice, then filed it under restricted access. The operation was recorded as a success. The mystery sniper became one of those whispered stories passed among elite units. The kind that makes you believe in unseen protectors with perfect aim. No official link was drawn between Lara's brief disappearance and the shots from Ridge 13. But that evening, as the SEALs returned, Mert approached her workstation and simply said, "Thank you." She looked up from her screen. "For what?" she asked. "You know what?" She turned back to her keyboard. "I was monitoring comms. That's all." I was standing at Echo Point 17, where Lara had started her climb. The wind up there shifted the scope by 0.7 degrees per second. No one hikes Ridge 13 at that hour unless they've already survived colder, harsher places. And Lara, she'd gone without once looking back. Type Ridgiad if you believe some ridges remain empty until memory returns. After the op, the team requested intel on their unknown sniper. Command gave no answer. A recon team later scaled Ridge 13. All they found was a scatter of brass, a threadbare windscreen, and one unfired round placed atop a stone etched with 1327. That number showed up in restricted files. Sniper ID 327. Status unknown. Colonel Aaron summoned Lara. She walked in wearing different clothes, not her tech uniform, but an older jacket faintly stained with powder. "How do you know that ridge could be reached?" Aaron asked. She answered simply, "Because I lived under those rocks once, when my unit didn't make it home." She was the only survivor of Valkyrie Echo, a recon squad listed MIA during the 2020 Northern Line campaign. The truth surfaced slowly, like old photographs emerging in chemical light. Valkyrie Echo had been a specialized recon team, 6 operators trained for deep mountain infiltration. Their mission was to set up forward observation posts in hostile zones and track enemy logistics moving through the high passes. But 3 weeks into their op, all contact went dark. Satellites showed no activity at their assigned locations. Recovery teams found leftover gear, but no bodies. After 60 days, Valkyrie Echo was officially listed Kia. Remains unrecovered. The official version claimed they'd been overrun by superior enemy forces. No survivors. But that wasn't the truth. They'd walked into a kill zone because the intel had been compromised. What should have been a quiet sector was heavily manned. Once they realized the setup, Valkyrie Echo didn't retreat. They held ground to buy time for a humanitarian convoy passing below, keeping enemy artillery distracted long enough for 200 civilians to get out alive. 5 members of the team died, holding 3 key positions. Lara, sniper call sign 327, had been posted on Ridge 13. Her orders, overwatch and document enemy movement. For 3 days, she watched her team get picked off one by one. She couldn't help, couldn't move, couldn't transmit. Their radios had been compromised. If she'd broken silence, she'd have exposed her position and doomed the civilians below. On the 3rd day, the enemy found the convoy's new path. They began setting up artillery for a mass strike. That's when Lara acted. 3 shots, each eliminating a forward observer. Now blind, the enemy couldn't aim. The convoy made it out. Those 3 rounds, later known as the 327 sequence, saved every civilian. But they also gave up her position. What followed was 6 days of survival against impossible odds. Alone on the mountain, hunted by an entire battalion, she relied on the land itself. Wind shifts, terrain shadows, the cold. She moved only when storm fronts could mask her heat signature. She survived on snow and ration crumbs, slept in hiding spots where she could wake, ready to fire. On the 6th day, a rescue unit finally reached her. They found her exactly where Ridge 13 offered its best shot. She was alive, alert, still watching the valley where her team had fallen. The med team noted severe dehydration, frostbite on 3 fingers, and combat stress trauma consistent with prolonged exposure. But during debrief, she wouldn't share tactical details. She declined therapy. She turned down every commendation offered. Her statement was brief: "I held position." That was it. The brass tried offering medals, rank, special roles. She refused them all. Instead, she asked for a reassignment to back-end support, analysis, comms, logistics, anything that kept her away from active fire. For the next 3 years, Lara Veysel faded into system, a ghost by choice. Brilliant, but deliberately quiet. She requested remote bases like Echo Point 17, where she could work under the radar. Still, some skills don't fade. She could still read terrain like a diary. Still feel a bullet's path before lifting the rifle. Still move like vapor through danger. Her file noted. Subject displays classical survivor's guilt. Tactical proficiency, exceptional. Recommend non-combat placement. They were wrong about the capacity, but right about everything else. Because when the SEALs got trapped in that same canyon where Valkyrie Echo had vanished, when the radios failed in the exact same way, when the ambush matched a nightmare she carried for years, something inside Lara stirred. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter, stronger, the unwavering decision that she'd never again stand by while others died, not when she had the power to intervene. The M2010 she chose wasn't by chance. It was the same type she'd carried with Valkyrie Echo. The scope she adjusted wasn't routine. It was instinct born of experience. When she left that final round, resting on stone marked 327, it wasn't a message. It was a vow. To her lost unit, to the SEAL she just pulled out alive, to the version of herself that never gave up. Inside Colonel Aaron's office, Lara felt the silence of 3 long years begin to lift. She'd tried so hard to disappear. She'd nearly forgotten who she was before the mountain stripped everything away. The 327 designation, Aaron said, scanning the file, appears in 17 different restricted operations. Improbable accuracy, impeccable timing, no confirmed ID. Because I requested to remain unlisted, Lara said. But you were there, Aaron asked. I never left, she replied. Always watching, waiting, just in case someone else ever needed what I had to offer. The colonel reviewed the images again, battlefield layouts, sniper angles, weather data from past missions, the Falcon Line intervention, the South Ridge pullout, the Desert Rose convoy coverage. All of it was you, he said. Lara gave a single nod. No commendation, no official post, because some of us aren't meant to be visible, she said. We show up when needed. That's enough. Outside, the SEAL team stood as she exited the room, not from protocol, but because they understood what she'd done. Mert stepped forward. If you ever teach a course, I want to be your first student. For the first time in years, Lara gave a real smile. The best lessons don't come from classrooms. Comment 327 loves. If you believe not all legends wear medals, some carry silence. At Echo Point 17, a quiet corner was renamed Ridge Point. No statues, no photo displays, just a plain wooden plaque that reads, if you're surrounded, look up quietly. Lara accepted a post as instructor for static shooting. No rifles allowed, just teachings on wind, terrain, and silence. One trainee once said, I used to think shooting meant winning. She taught us it means keeping promises. Lara's shift from silent watcher to mentor wasn't loud. It came the way seasons change, slowly, without fanfare. She never stood behind a podium or delivered any big speech. She simply started sharing the knowledge that kept her breathing when everything else had failed. Her first class had 12 special operations volunteers. They arrived seeking advanced shooting skills. They left understanding that the greatest weapon was patience. Before you even touch a rifle, she told them, learn to breathe with the mountain. The weather shifts every few minutes. Your pulse shifts every few seconds. The rifle's just the last step in a long conversation you've been having with the world around you. Training started at dawn, when thermal layers matched real-world combat best. Her students learned to track wind by watching how snow moved. They gauged distance by how sound echoed between cliffs. They felt approaching weather in the subtle drop of pressure against their skin. Lara's way of teaching wasn't conventional. She'd station them across the outpost, no rifles, just binoculars, and tell them to report everything they sensed, not just what they saw, but what they felt. What do you hear? Wind, ma'am? Maybe engine noise from a motor pool. What don't you hear? The pause always came. Then, eventually, bird call stopped 3 minutes ago. Something's moving in Sector 7. That's diesel, not generator. And the wind's gusting every 40 seconds. Fronts pushing in from the northwest. Week by week, They stopped seeing the terrain as background and started treating it like a breathing system. They realized that sharpshooting wasn't about the trigger pull. It was about complete awareness. Advanced students were led to Ridge 13 not to fire, but to understand why she'd chosen that exact angle from hundreds of options. How she'd measured not just range and drift, but heat drafts, acoustic concealment, and fallback options. Every spot has a story, she said, standing in the same place she defended the team. This one says, I see everything. I can reach anything, and I can vanish completely. But it also says I'm all in once I fire from here. Getting out isn't the priority. Finishing the job is. Her strongest lessons came without speaking. Some mornings, students arrived to find their gear laid out in patterns, paths subtly marked, or puzzles designed to be solved under pressure. One day, targets were placed at extreme, unworkable angles around the slope. No clear shooting lane existed. Hours passed. Then one student stood up. Ma'am, there's no clean angle. Correct. So what's the move? Change the problem. Don't force the shot. Now you're thinking. Each week, Lara handwrote a short message on Ridge 13 Summit Rock. No cameras allowed. To read them, students had to climb. One read, Patience defeats panic. Another, Invisible beats invincible. And the mountain remembers everything. Make sure it remembers you with respect. Ridge 13 became a pilgrimage spot for the serious ones. The climb tested the body. The lessons tested the mind. It was unlike anything they'd ever trained for. Type I climbed to read if you believe some lessons aren't downloaded, they're earned. Then one morning, Lara was gone. On her desk sat the M2010, cleaned and perfectly placed. Beside it, a small notebook. Inside, a single line, I don't leave traces, I leave vision. Ridge 13 turned into a discreet training site for elite snipers across the world. Every year, on the day she rescued the SEALs, a silent group hikes the summit. They stand for 1 full minute overlooking the canyon below, and in every mind, a single figure stands quietly, not loud, never flashy, but unforgettable. Her disappearance was just as quiet and cryptic as her time at base had been. No forwarding details, no exit debrief, no official goodbye. The last security footage showed her walking out at 0347, carrying only a standard hiking pack. Her signal vanished exactly where the Ridge 13 trail begins. Search crews combed the area but found nothing. It was as if the mountain had welcomed her back, taking her in as one of its own. The training she left behind didn't stop. Cadets still climbed the ridge, still found handwritten notes, still studied lessons in patience and presence. But now the messages came anonymously. Different scripts, different tongues, same truths reframed. Some believed Lara was still there, watching, guiding in her own hidden way. Others thought her former students were quietly keeping her lessons alive. What was true mattered less than what had grown into legend. The official record said she'd been reassigned. Status pending. Her file listed commendations for outstanding technical service. No mention of combat roles. Nothing about Ridge 13. But in the unspoken history past between special ops veterans, her story kept growing. Stories shared in hushed tones. How she'd shown up where no one should have been able to. How her lessons had changed outcomes in missions that were never documented. Ridge 13 started drawing students from places with no rosters. SEALs, Rangers, Marine sharpshooters, even operators from organizations with no official names. They came to sharpen technical skill and left with something far deeper. The understanding that real precision came from merging mind, mission, and terrain into one. At some point, a plaque appeared on the summit. No one admitted to installing it. The inscription read, "She taught us legends don't need names. Only the courage to show up when it matters." Neither snowstorms nor desert heat erased a trail of messages that kept surfacing, found carved in stone, written on weatherproof scraps, burned into rusted gear. Every note held practical clarity. Wind speed at dawn tells you the afternoon. Count heartbeats between shots, yours and theirs. The best position is the one your enemy can't imagine. Whether Lara still walked those ridges herself, or whether others carried on what she started, remained one of those stories that outlive facts. But every sniper trained on Ridge 13 knew the quiet truth. Some instructors leave behind more than lessons. They leave behind ways of seeing, and those ways save lives long after the teacher is gone. If stories like this speak to something inside you, drop a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to the Real Life Stories, where real people, not mass produced machines, keep the stories alive that the world should never forget.